Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Hannah Claire Reads. Today we are doing the June wrap-up. I read so many books in May and I didn't do a wrap-up because I was still in Texas at that point, so I deserve a June wrap-up. And I read, I believe, 11 books this month, which my reading has been trending downward. First, I read 20 books in April, and then I got 15 books or 16 books in May, and now we're down at 11. But that's okay. That's okay. I've gone back to work this month, so I can't do as much reading. Also, I'm reading Anna Karenina, which takes up a lot of time. So I'm not too upset about it. But let's go ahead and jump into my 11 books that I've read this month. The first book that I finished in the month of June is The One, which is the third book in the selection series. I decided to marathon them last month and I finished the very last one at the very beginning of June. This one was probably the most disappointing reread out of the trilogy. I loved the first two, and then I got to The One and I was so frustrated with America and with, oh, what's that one? The soldier guy? I'm blanking on what his name is. He frustrates me so much, but I was just getting really frustrated with everyone and I didn't think anything really got worked out very well, and the ending's interesting, but I don't know, it was just fine. So I gave that one 3 stars. And then it was time for me to drive back to South Carolina, where I now am, and I listened to a couple of audiobooks. The first audiobook that I listened to is Pride by E.B. Zaboy. I loved this book. It was so good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, one of my new favorites. So it is a modern day retelling of Pride and Prejudice, set in a gentrifying city. I believe it's in New York. It's in New York City. Yep, that's right. And it features 2 black teenagers as they are working out all the issues that are present in Pride and Prejudice. So like, a rich boy is moving into this neighborhood and all of the residents are really upset because they're like, we have a culture here, like you can't just come in here with all of your money and ruin this wonderful neighborhood, and working out all of that. It was such a good book. I highly recommend it. The second audiobook I listened to was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. Ever since I heard that those books were being turned into a new Disney Plus series, I was like, I've got to do the reread. But I don't really want to sit down and reread them. My books are back in Texas because they technically belong to my little sister. So I'm doing the audiobooks. And it's really fun. It's really fun to just fly through them as audiobooks. I'm pretty sure I gave it 4 out of 5 stars just because it feels a little immature at times. And I think honestly the chapter titles kind of spoil some things, but I mean, that's fine. It was a fun listen. Now we have my first physical book in a little while, and that was Renegades by Marissa Meyer. Pretty sure I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I had been wanting to read the series for a while, but I accidentally messed up when I made a Christmas wish list and I put the second book on my wish list instead of this one. And so I didn't have this one for a while, and then I bought it like a month or so ago and I finally got to it. It was really fun. I love Marissa Meyer. She's one of my all-time favorite authors, and I felt like I was reading a Marvel movie. It was so fun. Kind of reminds me of Vicious, just like a YA version of Vicious. It was so much fun to read. It did take me a really long time to read it, and I did end up relying on the audiobook. It was just taking me a while and I was really busy and just wasn't in the mood to read. So it took me a while to read it, which I think is why I didn't enjoy it as much as I would have wanted. But I think this series has so much potential and I'm really looking forward to completing it. Next, I decided that it'd probably be a good idea if I read one of my books that referenced a disease, so I could start knocking those books off my TBR, and I read The 11th Plague by Jeff Hirsch. I read this for a reading vlog, which you can see a couple of videos back, and I did a lot of tabbing, but this book was a huge disappointment because it's called The 11th Plague, and I thought that meant that the plague was going to be heavily featured, and it wasn't at all. Like, this is the sole symptom of a disease, this one little tab, that's it. It was not great. It was like an apocalyptic book that didn't really have anything new to it. I didn't love it. I think I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It wasn't super enjoyable. I'm pretty sure I read it in a day. I flew through it. I also got an audiobook so I could listen to it faster, but basically skimmed the end. Not fun. I was blessed with Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys, which obviously received 5 stars. This was a beautiful story of a girl and her family being taken from Lithuania to Siberia during World War II, and it was so good, beautifully written. I had already read Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys, and that book was fine. I just definitely preferred Between Shades of Grey, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Ruta Sepetys because I love the way she does her historical fiction. I feel like she covers stories that we don't ever hear from history, or just rarely hear. So I thought this was such a unique book, but so beautiful. So if you love historical fiction, particularly are interested in World War II, please read this book. And next I read Allegedly on my Kindle, and this is by Tiffany D. Jackson. I loved reading this book. It was so fun. It was heartbreaking, and a lot of times the characters were not super likable, but I felt like it was a really important story. So it follows a girl named Mary. When Mary was 9, she allegedly killed a baby girl, and everyone was so upset. Everyone was like, oh my goodness, you've got to put her on death row, like this is terrible. And she went to jail. She was isolated for a long time in her life, and eventually she moves into a group home instead, and then she's pregnant and she wants to keep her baby. And it's working through all of that. It discusses the criminal justice system, it discusses family, and it was a ride. I didn't love the ending. I felt like it was a little rushed, and it kind of took a sharp turn in a way that I wasn't expecting and didn't make a ton of sense. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, but I highly recommend this book. It was a really interesting mystery at the same time, and I love mystery thrillers, so I cannot wait to pick up more of Tiffany D. Jackson's books. This month I have been trying to pick up more books on anti-racism, and the first one that I read, which this is the only reason this is the first one I read was because it was the first one that popped up from my library that I had a list of holds of books from, but that is White Fragility. And my eyes were opened reading this book. There was just so much that I didn't know about racism, and I felt like this was such an important thing for me to read, and for every other white person to read. It was just so important. And if you are not out there educating yourself, like, you need to be doing that. Read books. Like, we are on here to discuss books. Like, we can put aside a book on our TBR to read a book about how we should be less racist. Like, it is so important, and it made me more aware of so many prejudices that I just didn't realize that I had, and the problem of that, but also like how to change those and how to address those when they come up. It was so important. I know a lot of people are talking about how we shouldn't be reading White Fragility. We need to be reading other books. I think they're all good, and I'm trying to read more from Black authors. And right now I'm reading Just Mercy, which is a true story of a Black lawyer defending people who are on death row. And that one is, wow, there's a lot in that one, and I'm looking forward to reading even more books on anti-racism. This just happened to be the first one that came in from my library, but I highly recommend all of you out there to be picking up books on anti-racism. So then I continued the rereads for this month, and I decided to pick up Illuminate by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So I had read Illuminate and Gemini years ago, but I never made it to Obsidio. But now I own Obsidio and I want to finish it, but I don't remember anything that happened in the rest of the trilogy, so I need to reread them. But then when I started reading Illuminate, I remembered that there was a plague in it, and so now I get to use it for my research. Lots of tabbing, and this was really fun. It wasn't as good as I remember it. Which is probably because I know the twist in it now, but it was still good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm looking forward to finishing up the trilogy hopefully next month. Next up is the book that I read. Next up is the book that I decided to read after my Try a Chapter challenge, which was the last video I filmed. It was super fun to film. I highly recommend you check it out. But that is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This was not what I expected it was going to be. When I read the first part for the Try a Chapter challenge, it was amazing. It was a thriller, loved it. Very fast paced, and it did stay very fast paced. I just think it should have been longer. Normally I don't think books should be longer, but this should have been longer. It's so short. It's only 220 pages, and I felt like there just needed to be more there was just more that needed to be fleshed out. And I felt like the author was trying to have like a really intense mystery, but also dismantle the patriarchy of Nigeria. And both of those are really interesting, but it needed just more pages. More pages needed to go into it, and I came out of it really confused, and I just wanted more. So, I mean, it definitely wasn't bad. I definitely would recommend it to a fellow thriller lover, but I gave it 3 stars. I just wanted more. I just expected more. And finally, we have the book that I finished literally an hour ago, and that is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This was so fun to read. I had so much fun reading it. I had started it during the Try a Chapter Challenge, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna read this one next. Right after I finish My Sister the Serial Killer, I've gotta pick this one up. And I did. I'm so happy. I'd been thinking about it for a while, thinking, you know, maybe I should read it. But then I was starting to doubt whether I even wanted to read it, because it's a horror book, and I got very horror vibes from it. And I was like, I'm not a big horror fan. But then I started it, and it really wasn't a horror book. Like, there were horror elements, but it was more so a mystery, more so a thriller, and that's what I loved. So it gave kind of like a nice introduction to the genre, while also being really well written and really well crafted. So I loved this, and I'll give you a quick synopsis. It is told both in the words of the main character, Maggie, as she is left this house from her dad after he dies, and she is trying to renovate it and sell it. And she's trying to work through ghosts of her past, both figuratively and literally. And at the same time, you are reading chapters from her dad's book that was written about the house, and it's marketed as a true story, but Maggie believes that it wasn't true and that it was completely made up, and she doesn't believe in ghosts anymore. It's 25 years later. She thinks it's all terrible, and she's mad at her dad. So she's working through all of that, and it was so good. I couldn't put it down. I literally had to make myself put it down and said, no, Hannah, you can't read it tonight because you will get scared and you won't sleep, because I'm a child. And so I loved it though. I loved it so much. 5 out of 5 stars. So I did want to do a quick TBR for the month of July. I can't believe it is already July, but also because it's July, this means that it is the Reading Rush month. I have not been able to participate in the Reading Rush since it was called BookTubathon, and it was like 6 years ago. So I'm very excited that I'm actually going to be able to participate this year. So I'm going to make a separate video for my Reading Rush TBR, but I did want to show some of the books that I'm reading just because I plan to read them. And some of the books are for the Mortals, Monsters, and Merge readathon, which I heard about over at my friend Renegades' channel, and she's hosting it with a couple of other people. And so I'll leave the official link down below for that readathon. I won't be going into depth because on what I'm reading for that readathon, because I haven't completely decided, but I'm going to show you some of the books that are going to fulfill some of those prompts and that I just plan on reading in July. So the first 2 books that I hope to read are Gemina and Obsidio. So these are also going to fulfill some of my prompts for the MMM readathon, but I also just want to get to these while Illuminate is fresh in my head. They shouldn't take that long, but Illuminate also took longer than I would have hoped to read. But I remember when I first read Gemina, it took me 1 day. So maybe I'll be able to fly through these. Hopefully I will, so I can get to a lot more books. Next, I hope to get to The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. I read Truly Devious back in May and loved it. And I tried the beginning of this for the Try a Chapter Challenge and didn't get into it immediately, but I'm hoping if I just get a little bit further, I'll love it. Really love Truly Devious, so I'm hoping I'm gonna love this one too. Next is the book that I'm probably gonna pick up next, and that is Girls Like Us by Randy Pink. And I want to read this because it follows a couple girls who are dealing with unplanned pregnancies in the 1970s, and they don't know what they're supposed to do. And I think they find community with each other. And one of my goals in life is to work with women who have unplanned pregnancies as a Christian missionary, and provide support to them no matter what their decision is. So I'm looking forward to, even though this is a fictional story, I just want to learn more about what people are going through during this time, because it's got to be terrifying, and I just want to hear their stories, even if it's fictional. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. Next is a book that I've started and I put down because I just wasn't in the mood for fantasy, and I ended up picking two thrillers, but that is A Song of Race and Ruin. First of all, this is the most beautiful cover. I love it, but there's just a lot of world building. I had to do tabs just so that I could understand what was going on, because it was just, my brain was all over the place. And I'm learning that as I've gotten older, I've liked fantasy less. So it was just harder for me to get into it, but I'm going to finish it this month. I'm going to finish it because it is good and I know it will be amazing. I just need to read it. And finally, if I read what I'm supposed to read, I should be finishing Anna Karenina in July. I am way behind. I haven't even finished part 3 and we're supposed to have finished part 4 now. It's like 130 pages behind, and that's a lot when it's Anna Karenina. But hopefully I will get it together. I will finish Anna Karenina. But that is my July TBR plus my June wrap up. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books or you want to read any of these books. If you have done a June wrap up or a July TBR, leave your link to your video down below and I'd love to watch it. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. Please check out my latest video, the Try a Chapter Challenge. I had a lot of fun making that video, so please go check it out. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!